The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once, but twice. And yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Rescue Michigan Weekly Live Stream. Not sure what that pregnant pause was at the end of the video there, but oh well. Welcome, everyone. We got some very special guests tonight. We figured it was a very slow week in news, so we could go big on the guests this week. But no, in all seriousness, we got some great stuff to talk about tonight. We have Dennis Marburger and Dan McKnight from Defend the Guard, and we have Patrice Johnson from Pure Integrity for Michigan Elections and the Michigan Fair Elections Institute. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Plus, of course, it's been a bit of a week, both in Washington and in Lansing, with, of course, Trump absolutely gutting the federal bureaucracy. And so we'll have a lot to talk about there. The confirmation hearings, of course, as we just saw that clip from the Tulsi Gabbard hearing. And, of course, also a lot of controversy with Bobby Kennedy and Kash Patel. We'll talk about that, too. But first, some housekeeping news. We are actually not on Facebook tonight due to a highly technical issue, namely that Facebook is a pile of garbage. Hopefully that'll be cleared up in the future. But honestly, I have to try to be on Facebook because a lot of people actually watch us on Facebook, amazingly, but I don't know why anybody is on Facebook in 2025. But here we are. We'll try to get this sorted out by next week. But in the meantime, we are, of course, live on Rumble, YouTube, where we've just recently got another content strike, and also live on X. So thank you guys for being with us for all of this. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to us on Rumble, because one of these days that might be the last platform left for us. Anyway, let's get to our guests here. So first, I want to bring on Patrice Johnson, who has been on a friend of the show multiple times, one of the top people studying all of the crazy things going on in Michigan elections, and she has some new findings to report to us. Although, Patrice, I heard you went to the inauguration. How was that?
Oh, it was fabulous. There were actually people dancing in the streets, and it's like people were popping out from undercover and saying how happy they were. So it was it was a whole change in mood. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I should have asked Dan. I don't know if you or Dennis went to Washington. You did go. What was your experience like?
It was the same. It was I've been to DC 100 times. It was the first time I've ever felt like the people that were there were excited about the future. It wasn't just a head down, trudging to work every day in the bureaucratic establishment. It felt like a real renaissance for America. Other than everybody getting sick from being out in the 18-degree cold, it was an incredible experience.
Right on. And by the way, obviously we're going to take our time with each of the guests, but for those who don't know, Jan, you run an organization called Defend the Guard, and you and I have somehow never quite gotten to work together over the years, despite running in the same circles. You and I have both known Gary Glenn for many years. I was actually his campaign manager when he ran for State House 10, 11 years ago. And I guess you go back with him even farther than that. Is that right?
Yeah, Gary has mentioned you a bunch of times before his passing. But yeah, Gary came to Idaho in 1978 to run my grandfather's failed state Senate campaign. Gary was an 18-year-old from hotshot from North Carolina. And my grandpa had agreed to run on a right to work platform. And Gary was an intern with the National Right to Work Committee. And he came to Idaho and converted my grandpa, helped him run. My dad was the union steward at the Electrical Workers Union at the time. And Gary and my dad would circle the room and stare at each other, wanting to kill each other because they were on opposite sides of the right to work issue. And he never left. He became a fixture in our family. It converted my dad eventually to become the co-chair of the Right to Work Committee for Idaho, and then practiced confrontational politics better than anybody I've ever seen in my life, and was able to remove 23 or 27 legislators from the Idaho legislature until he had a majority and could pass the bill. And he's my brother. He's a mentor. I sat with him and held his hand as he took his final breaths, and I miss him dearly.
Yeah, me too. And speaking of confrontational politics, Allegan News says, can we start finding good candidates? Not FBI Mike, talking about the open U.S. Senate race. Yeah, I think I've beaten that issue to death on this program in past episodes. But anyway, so let's, I guess I want to first go to Patrice, because you've got some interesting news to report about the 2024 election, and in particular, how transparent certain clerks have been or have not been. So I've got a few visual aids here, and you'll have to direct me, Patrice, which you want me to put on the screen first. But why don't you guys set the table for us, and you can take it from there.
Oh, sure. Well, back in December, we work with the Michigan data team and with Check My Vote, as you know. We have actually 870, as of November, we had 872 folks that were out there analyzing the voter rolls and working to clean the voter rolls, which, as you know, are bloated, and they're a problem with them. So anyway, after these folks, Check My Vote folks, have been getting the data every month from the Secretary of State's office since I think it's 2021. And then they expected to get the data about the election in December, the 1st of December. They release these files the 1st of every month. And they expect to be able to see how many people had voted, and to be able to have the number of votes match with the number of recorded voters. And those numbers were not there. So it was very peculiar. Wow. And so they submitted a FOIA and said, what happened here? This has been released every month for, years. Why is it we're not being able to see this information? And the Sherry Hines, who is the FOIA person for the Secretary of State, said that the clerks had not been providing information to the Secretary of State. So, of course, that raised the question, how could they certify an election if they didn't have the numbers? And also, why would the clerks possibly not be submitting the numbers? So
it's a bit odd.
It's an odd thing. It's happened in the past elections too, where there's just a delay in releasing the information. And then when they do release the information, the numbers have never matched. And when I say matched, I mean the number of voters has never matched the number of ballots received, and not even close. So it's an issue. So anyway, the group decided then to FOIA every county. And, Michigan has 83 counties. So yep. We did all 83 counties and said, please send us your files in terms of who voted in the past election. And because these are public, I should mention, these are public information. Freedom of Information Act guarantees the right for citizens to have government information, as long as it doesn't impinge on somebody's private information. Right. And this is not a private issue. So we were surprised that 42% of the clerks responded right away and sent the files. But then a lot of other, you can pop up that chart if you want.
Yeah, I'll bring the chart up right now. And I also want to just interject one thing, just to also, the audience should know this. This is extremely ordinary, standard information that clerks should be accustomed to providing all the time. Like when I work on campaigns, you are daily querying the clerk's offices for absentee ballot chasers and things like that. This is, the notion that a member of the public goes to a clerk and says, I'd like to see who voted in this election. They can't just look at you and be like, oh, this is no one's ever asked us that before. No, people ask us this kind of stuff all the flipping time. And so yeah, this is I know you also sent me a spreadsheet that seemed to have some additional tabs. So if there's something else you wanted me to bring up, just let me know. But
the pie chart is a good one. But yeah, what you're showing here is the list of all the counties. The group kept track of whether they responded, basically, whether they provided data within 5 days, whether they provided data without charge, or whether they were willing to provide the data, but they said they needed payment. And then there were some that just flat out denied. And some were saying that they were being told not to provide the data, which is just really peculiar because we've been having difficulty reconciling the data for months. Actually, since Secretary of State Benson took over, we now have 108% more registered voters than we have voting age citizens. So, and the numbers keep shifting every month. The histories keep shifting, which is odd because history should never change. If you voted and you're recorded as having voted, that should stay there. It shouldn't pop on and pop off. So what you're seeing,
the other thing that just strikes me at this chart too is how incredibly inconsistent these policies can be. Like you would imagine, there's a Freedom of Information Act, which you're obligated by law to honor. How could a third of them just comply? A quarter of them, or 18% of them say, okay, we're going to charge you a fee, which somehow the others don't have to, even though maybe they could. Almost a third of them just completely blow you off completely, don't even answer any of your queries. And then another almost 10% just say, we will not under any circumstances give you this information. Am I correct in how I read this? And how does this make any sense at all?
That's exactly it. So we decided to put the information out there and start a scorecard where people could see, basically how their clerks are doing. Because, for example, the ones that are not responding, it could just be that they're on vacation. Some of these folks are part-time. We're not trying to point fingers of accusing people, but when they flat out deny, or when they're charging $700 or so for a punch of a couple keys,
the costs are amazing.
Really not reasonable. Pardon?
Yeah. So some of them is just saying, we'll give it to you for free. And Eaton County wants $650.
Yeah, that's kind of unusual. Yeah, and one county just wants $12 or something. It's not much. But when you start charging, if we were to have to pay every county for the data that is supposed to be publicly available, that we're supposed to be getting from the Secretary of State's office and the Bureau of Elections, then that becomes prohibitive. It cuts the citizens out from being able to look at the elections. And that's the issue
control here, which is that you guys sent all these clerks the exact same letter, I assume, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is the ways the different counties treat you.
Well, and we followed up, I think several, up to 3 times at least, with all the ones that we were classifying as denied and non-responsive, because we wanted to be sure that there wasn't a misunderstanding. They didn't receive the email or they weren't aware.
Yeah. And, most of these counties, obviously, most of these counties are going to have likely Republican clerks, or at least Republican Party affiliated clerks, because most of the more rural counties are. The Democrats are in Wayne, Washtenaw, Oakland County, but actually, surprisingly, Wayne, Washtenaw was one of the most accommodating counties. They just gave you everything promptly, it looks like.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's party related necessarily, and the counties are not, the clerks aren't used to getting this request, because normally the Secretary of State's office fulfills it, but they provide this data to the Secretary of State's office, so they have it. It's not like they don't have it. So we were just trying to get the information. All we want to understand is who voted and have it match the number of ballots. That's, it boils down to that, trying to figure out matching the numbers. Yeah. Balancing.
Which should match at a precinct level even, because
that's right.
They have procedures for reconciling every single precinct at the end of the election, and to make sure that the number of ballots recorded on the poll book matches the number of ballots in the tabulator and so forth. And for some reason, Wayne County completely screws it up all the time, but most counties get it mostly right.
Most counties, actually, if you're off by one vote, the canvassers won't accept it till the clerk goes back and fixes it. But in Wayne County, for example, in 2020, 2020, I believe 70% of the precincts were off. They did not balance. And in Michigan, it's peculiar because if they submit a case of votes and they don't balance, they'll mark them as unbalanced, and then they're not subject to recount, which makes it very, very peculiar. They get locked. They're kind of set aside. So that you can't, of the ones that you really need to look at, you can't open up those.
And Jocelyn Benson's blowing you off too. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we started this whole project because we weren't getting the standard data from the state, which we've received every month for 3-4 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On Rumble, Bree says, can we scroll through the chart again so we can see all of them? I'll do that. And of course, you guys can rewatch the video later on YouTube or Rumble and pause the video too, so you can see all the individual counties. But the discrepancy here is amazing.
Adam, can I throw something in on this just because I have some experience in this? So in Idaho, I know that tallying votes, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And it's not as difficult as they're making it. I don't know what we do different in Idaho, but we have every single ballot, every single precinct, every single absentee ballot done, and we're done by 10 p.m. on election night. And our system is, I wouldn't say we're any more advanced than anybody else, but as I'm chasing absentee ballots all the way up until 8 p.m. on election night, I'm getting real-time updates from our election clerks as absentee ballots are being counted and they come off of my list in real time. So when the polls close shortly after that, I get a number that shows 100% of all absentees have either been accounted for or the numbers match the polling books. I can't for the life of me figure out why states like Michigan and Arizona and Georgia can't seem to get this right. Florida gets it right. They're the third most populated state in the country. They get it right. What is it we have to do? Is it secretaries of state that we need to start going after? Or is it county election clerks?
Well, in my experience, Michigan's elections were perfectly run with no one complaining about anything until two things happened. First, Jocelyn Benson got elected Secretary of State, and then we passed Prop 2. Or I should say voters were deceived into passing Prop 2. So there you go. Jay Mashad says, since this is public record, why isn't it just available for download from the Bureau of Elections without having to ask for it? All those counties are putting the data into the state system. Good question, Jay. You would think so. By the way, guys, whenever I'm looking at Rumble, I'm looking up and away like that because I'm looking at Rumble on the screen above me. So just so, Dan, I don't want you guys to think I'm rolling my eyes or
no, not at all.
When I'm looking up and away like that, I'm looking at the Rumble chats is what that means.
But also, in answer to your point, Dan, that it's by 8 o'clock, all the absentee ballots are in. They could easily produce a number of the count of those absentee ballots, even if they're not all fully counted at that time. But with 9 days of early voting, there's really no reason why the absentee ballots wouldn't be fed through the tabulators. So the answer is, I don't know. We should be able to get that information. And our ballots should be treated like $1 would be treated if you're working in a financial institution.
Absolutely.
You know, it shouldn't be just, well, we think we were either $3,000 in the green or you're overdrawn in the bank. We should know how many ballots we received, and that number should match the number of voters recorded as voting. It's not complex math.
I'll tell you what, I've got a side complaint for Jocelyn Benson. The website that used to have the updated district boundary maps has been taken offline, and you can't find an accurate, up-to-date state house and senate district map anymore because they just redrew a bunch of those lines after the court case. So you can still find a few lousy maps of the 2022 boundaries floating around, but those are wrong now because of this recent court decision. Yeah. And there's nowhere. I mean, prove me wrong. Chat, anyone, send me a link if you find an up-to-date, accurate state house and senate district map. I can't find one to save my life. And the maps on the Secretary of State's website still go to these dead links that are outdated maps that are also no longer available. So that's it's one of those, you know, it might seem like a political, you know, nerd kind of thing to have to notice that and be angry, but I got to send an email blast to people saying, contact your lawmakers tomorrow because of this insane bills that have been expired being signed into law deal. We'll talk about that later in the stream. And yeah, I don't see any up-to-date maps. Heather says, when will the Senate maps be ready? I don't know. That'd be good to know. Allegan News says most areas now set up separate district for absentees at a separate machine. You can start processing before 8 p.m. Also, Michigan voting districts now only be 5,000 people. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Prop 2.
And while we're talking about issues with absentee ballots, there is a serious issue that the clerks, most parts of the election are open to people, poll challengers and election inspectors observing. Now, and the signature verification on absentee ballots is done behind closed doors by a clerk, and that should be public information. You should be able to have people observing the signature and the verification of the ballots as they're coming in, because they're just looking at the outside of the envelopes and the signatures on them. There's nothing infringing at all on people's privacy of their ballot. So
Right.
That's another issue too. I mean, we can go through a whole lot of issues, but that's another one.
So, Patrice, if people want to do something about this, what can they do to get connected with you? What's the next step for them?
Oh, well, we'd love to have them get involved in an organization. We have task forces now in half the counties. So if you go to mifairelections.org, you can sign up to become a subscriber and get involved and start volunteering with us. We'd love that. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Excellent. Yeah, Sherry says the SOS page is ridiculous to navigate. Yeah, that's a problem that predates Benson. By the way, that reminds me of some other random piece of news I found out this week. Deloitte, the company that does software for the government agencies, is scrambling right now to remake and re-release the entire state unemployment agency's website in the next few months, because that's always the best way to get a new website out for the governments, to really rush it out the door on a hard deadline. So if you're planning on being fired in the next few months, you might want to get on that. You can get your unemployment application before they, although apparently the website they have right now is no good either. So I don't know what you're going to do, but just heads up, guys, that's coming too. Yeah, Allegan News says Benson was supposed to modernize the SOS. Yeah, imagine that. Anyway, well, Patrice, you're certainly welcome to hang out with us. We talk about some other issues this week, and we've got a lot of them. But now I do also want to go to Dan and Dennis Marburger. And you guys are part of this group called Defend the Guard, which is something that I've had, like, that's been in my orbit for a very long time. A good friend of ours, Dennis and me. Dan, you must have known Tony DeMott too. He was Michigan's Campaign for Liberty director until, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. But this was a big issue for him too. So why don't you tell folks a bit about Defend the Guard and what you guys are looking to do at the state and I think also national level. Am I correct?
Sure. Yep, absolutely. I'll give you a kind of the rundown. So Defend the Guard is a piece of 10th Amendment state-based legislation. It's a way for the states to reclaim some authority over a runaway U.S. foreign policy. And the bill is very simple. It's about 120 words or so, and it just simply states that the Michigan National Guard will not be released into federal service, so they won't be activated into federal duty, to participate in an overseas war unless Congress has first declared war. Very simple concept. It's already kind of in the Constitution. It's already law, but we haven't done it that way for over 80 years. And last time Congress declared war was 1942 against Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. And since that time, the state militia, or the National Guard, has been used as the easy button for the military and the federal government to wage these endless wars and conduct these police actions and peacekeeping missions, the global war on terror, Desert Storm, Vietnam, Korea, without Congress actually doing their job. And so we tried to fight this as global war on terror veterans. We took 100 veterans to Washington, D.C. In fact, Gary was there with us when we did this in 2019 to make our case to our congressmen and senators that it's time to try peace. President Trump was talking about ending these wars. We've been fighting for 18 years. We just want to make our case. We didn't have a mission there, a purpose, a definition of victory or success, no way to come home. And so we just asked them to please tell us what conditions need to be met on the ground for you to advocate for the end of war. And to a person, every single congressman and senator took a picture with one of our veterans that were there, gave us all the platitudes. We support the troops, and then ultimately just politely escorted us out of the office, except for Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, bless her heart, she was the only one that was honest. And she said, as long as I'm in this seat, we will never come home from Afghanistan. And so we decided, you know what, we can't fight in the swamps of DC. We need to fight for more favorable ground. And we decided to go to the states and take the fight to the states, use the 10th Amendment, the Dick Act of 1903, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, and put it all together and come up with this effort called Defend the Guard. And we know that our lever of influence is stronger with our state representatives and state senators than it is with some lost bureaucrat with no soul in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and the Michigan National Guard fundamentally is an agency of the state of Michigan, not of the federal government. And,
Right.
you know, at this particular moment, I think people are a lot more optimistic than we had been in the past of the prospects for peace, although you never really know. And we're in this moment right now where Trump is radically changing what our federal government's posture is on a lot of issues, but where that goes in, you know, in the courts and what happens in the next several months, we really don't know. And all, you know, the other thing I would point out too is when a lot of these, 2 years ago, when Joe Biden, the Democrats were in charge of everything, you had this problem, and, you know, and potentially, and there's been a lot of rumors about certain American soldiers being involved covertly in the operations in Ukraine. Now we have a political climate that might be more favorable to passing these laws, at least at the federal level. And yet, at the same time, like, the reason why you have to pass them while you still can is because the shoe might be on the other foot in a couple of years. And
Correct.
frankly, no president should have this kind of power. Like,
that's been our argument. We believe in what we call the Scott Horton principle, where you attack the right from the right, and you attack the left from the left, and you outflank your political opponents. And so we fight this fight in a very nonpartisan manner. We make the case to the Republican legislators from a constitutional rule of law foundation, and when we talk to the left, we talk to them from a traditionally Democratic anti-war position. And we know that they're not the anti-war party that they used to be. Frank Church does not exist in the Democratic Party anymore. And so we do that. We try to remain very nonpartisan. We've given speeches at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, where it's the populist left and the populist right coming together on this issue. And it's kind of a cool environment. And we speak across the political spectrum. And right now in the Trump administration, we have two appointees that were former Democrats, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, who both support this bill. Our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has publicly endorsed the bill. President Trump speaks all the time. J.D. Vance speaks all the time about going to war the proper way, and that we should never do it for a war of choice, that it should be done for the defense of America, and it should never be prolonged. And so finally, we're in this environment where we are the modern day hippies. We're the counterculture, and it's kind of fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, I must push back on the accusation that we're any kind of hippies. You know, I'll be anti-war, but when people say, "Oh, you're a hippie," it's like, no, I'm not. To me, like, Dennis Kucinich is like a hippie type, and there's a big distinction between someone like him who's like, "Yeah, man, just wouldn't peace be nice?" and you got to get what you give back, man, versus like a reasoned argument like Ron Paul saying this war is illegal, it's immoral, it's not doing us any good, it's damaging. We're overextending our empire. This is going to cause blowback. You know, these are articulable, sound reasons why wars of choice are a terrible idea. And
that's such a great point, Adam. And I'm glad you said it, because to my core, I'm not an anti-war, hate Ashbury circle, drum circle beatnik. That's not who I am. I believe that if America is attacked or there is a threat against our country, our people, our sovereignty, then the National Guard should be the force that fights America's wars without any handcuffs. Unrestrain them. Let them win the war and let them come home. We shouldn't be occupying 2/3 of the globe with our National Guard. And a great example of this is Syria right now. You look in Syria, President Obama halfway tried to do it right. He went to Congress and asked for authorization to go to war in Syria, and Congress told him no. So he turned around and went to war without him. And when the war started, 3% of the troops involved in the war were from the National Guard. When the al-Assad regime fell in December, at the end of this war that was now 11 years long, 58% of the boots on the ground were from the National Guard. They've become the easy button for this runaway empire. And then 2 weeks after Assad fell, the DOD comes out and says, we apologize, but we've been lying. There's not 900 troops in Syria. There's 2,000 or more. And so we went through and did a comprehensive search of the internet and found hometown newspapers talking about troop deployments from every state until we could come up with an accurate number of troops on the ground from the National Guard. And it's still almost 60%. The DOD won't tell us. They won't answer the question. They just refer us to each state's National Guard Bureau. And so they're still playing a shell game, and they've been doing it for years. And this is the way for the states to kind of interpose between an overreaching federal government and their own militia.
Yeah, I'd like to add a comment here, if I might.
Go ahead. Yes.
Thanks. So, yes, first of all, Dan has done great work with this organization. They've been at it for a while. So one of the keys here, of course, is persistence and not giving up after the first rebuff. So building using each experience as a building block for future success. And now Defend the Guard is positioned to really make big waves here in 2025. I think last year there were 3 different state legislatures, 2 different houses that actually put it through. The Arizona Senate was one of them. The Arizona Speaker of the House put the bill in his desk, wouldn't let it go forward. And then, as I understand, he was running for state Senate, and the group got together and said, we're going to primary this guy. And so they knocked him out of office there. So there's a number of states that have already had this come up just in this last week. Virginia, Wyoming, and South Dakota. I believe in all 3 states it went through committees, the initial committees, and it's being introduced in a bunch of other states. It's also introduced once again here in Michigan. So there's a lot of exciting news here and very important developments. And the thing that I think really needs to be emphasized on this is that this is a form of law enforcement. We say that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. We see the people in Washington, D.C. violating it on a daily basis in all sorts of ways. And this is one of the most consequential because it's a matter of life and death for Americans. And it's a matter of life and death for these countries overseas. And what we've seen is while they've been using the National Guard as the easy button, as Dan says, in this global war on terror, this has had horrible impacts on Syria. What happened to those people? What's happened in Iraq? What's happened in these other countries? And we're seeing all throughout the Middle East and throughout the Caucasus region, the Christian people of these areas are their numbers are dwindling, and in the Holy Land, their numbers are dwindling, and America's becoming less safe and less free because of it. So this Defend the Guard movement, which, as Dan mentioned, is utilizing the 10th Amendment foundational principles, things that Jefferson and Madison talked about, is actually a key point of leverage to restoring constitutional law and order and making the world a more safe place, making America more secure, and reducing the drains on our liberty, on our safety, and on our prosperity because of these criminals in Washington, D.C. And so it's great to see, and a veteran like Dan, when you hear his story and when he talks about his situation in Afghanistan and what he went through, and see all the other veterans like Pat McGee, right, in West Virginia, and Diego Rivera, and the others, it's really quite an inspiring group, and the prospects for this legislation look good as long as we can continue the confrontational politics and keep the activism going.
Yeah, speaking of that, let me just read a couple of chats real quick. On Rumble, Bree says, Dennis on the Michigan Republican Party Issues Committee is an active participant with fantastic resolutions proposed that passed. So let me ask you, Dennis, I had up on the screen a moment ago, this is an older version of the bill. This is from 2020, but and I see my former boss, Rep. Riley, was on this one. But do you guys have a plan to introduce this bill in the state legislature this session, or is someone already working on that, or what's the latest?
Yes, they are. Steve Carra in the House, Jonathan Lindsay in the Senate, and there are, I think, other co-sponsors in the House. I think Matt Maddock is one of them. In the Senate, Jim Runstead has worked on this as well. And yes, we were, and Bree, thank you very much for mentioning that. We were able in the Issues Committee to get the Defend the Guard resolution through, and State Senator Lindsay came by when we voted on it during that state committee meeting. And then at not this week's meeting, but the one previous to that in Frankenmuth, this came up, and it was endorsed and supported unanimously by the Michigan Republican Party State Committee, which we thought was a fairly significant event. I guess it's the closest we can get to getting it into the we don't really have a state party platform. So this is about as close as you can get to that, unless we have it voted on by the convention. We got one of those coming up, so maybe, well.
So that's what Dennis has done there is a great example of a roadmap that we've built. We've got Defend the Guard added as a plank to the GOP platforms in Idaho, Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire, Maine, Texas. I believe there's one or two others, and resolutions in half a dozen other states. And then we made it we got it voted on as a legislative priority in Texas, which put it on the ballot in the 2024 primary election. So the Republican voters in Texas got to vote on Defend the Guard. It was called Prop 6. And it passed with 83% of the vote in Texas. 83% of the Republicans support this concept of following the Constitution when we go to war. Imagine that. What's funny is it outperformed even Donald Trump in Texas. And what's even more funny than that is the number of no votes on Defend the Guard matched almost to the number of votes for Nikki Haley in that primary. So is it causation or correlation? I'm not sure, but I think the Republican Party is having a monumental shift in getting away from this neocon movement. And we all know the truth of the neocons. They were the left, and they came to the Republican Party because they saw an opening. They saw an opportunity where they could use common sense over law enforcement and an aggressive war stance to take over the Republican Party. The neocons are not conservative Republicans. They never have been, and it's time for us to rip them out of the party, root and branch.
Yeah, they're the Trotskyites, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a great book on that, Reclaiming the American Right by Justin Raimondo, talking about the Trotskyite roots of James Burnham and all the rest of them. And since you mentioned your sponsor, Senator Lindsay, I'd be remiss not to give a plug for your event coming up, the Great New Party's second annual 10th Amendment Awards Washington Day Dinner, which Rescue Michigan is pleased to be a sponsor of this event. And you have it coming up this Friday, 6:00 p.m., February 7th. And this is in Redford. There is the link on the screen there, tinyurl.com/GNPWDD25. There's a QR code there. I guess I can zoom in maybe. And of course, for you guys watching on Rumble and YouTube, you can always replay the video, pause the video, and get the link to that. And of course, gnppac.com is the website. So looking forward to seeing you guys there. Should be a blast.
It should be. And Adam, I'd like to point out a couple of things here. And thank you for showing that. It's going to be a great event. Shane Trejo, you know quite well, and
Sure.
Shane does great work, and this is his group, the Grand New Party PAC. He's putting this together.
Yep.
We're very excited about the speakers. Dan being one of them, of course, and he's very dynamic and very knowledgeable on these things, and very effective. Also, Dave Benner coming up from Tennessee, and Dave, of course, does a lot of historical work and work with the 10th Amendment Center, and he'll also be a speaker. So for all of you folks who are watching this dinner will be an outstanding event, rewarding. Every once in a while, there are a few of these elected officials who deserve plaudits, commendation, as opposed to most of them who deserve condemnation. But the ones that do the right things will be honored here, including Senator Lindsay. And also the speakers we're going to have are going to be outstanding. So, that's great. I'm glad to see Sherry's coming. This is going to be a fantastic event. A lot of knowledge will be shared, and it'll be a fellowship and a wonderful place for patriots and liberty lovers and good people to get together and to celebrate and to plan future endeavors that'll be important for securing liberty and peace and freedom.
Yeah, it's amazing how many lawmakers do pretty much nothing. And then you have folks like Gary Glenn and Jonathan Lindsay who are like the champion of all the issues we care about. And whether it's transparency or the Defend the Guard bill, they're like on top of everything, it's amazing.
Yeah, and Michigan just had another one that got turned out. Steve Johnson was another one of the great ones. He was our previous sponsor.
He should come back. He should come back. He's got 2 more terms in him now since they passed the criminal commission.
Oh, we sign him up. Let's get him back on board.
Yeah.
So I think he's working on a states' rights organization now. I'm not sure which one it is, but
yeah, I haven't heard from him since he left the house. But yeah, he was fantastic. Anyway,
I'm really looking forward to being at that convention this weekend. I'll tell you, there's something I almost never do, and that's ever praise a politician. I never do, because they'll hold it over your head forever because they're going to screw up. They are.
You too.
Yep. And so they will take that endorsement and they will ride it out forever. But when somebody does something right, and I will put down my sword for a moment, and I will raise a glass and recognize them. And it seems like Senator Lindsay is really one of the good ones. And when they are, we find them and we go to battle for them. It doesn't matter what the issue is. We have a process called the Red Fox 40, where we analyze every issue, and find out if it's important to us, is it important to our friends, and is it worth going to battle over. And so, like with Gary, anything he was lined up with, I was there for the fight because I knew he was going to be principled, and it wasn't for some other outside interest.
Absolutely. All right, let me read a couple more chats, and then we've got some more topics to cover. Allegan News says neocons and neolibs need to form a third party. They have the Democrat Party. They don't need to do anything else. We're glad they're back where they came from. Also says DOD needs to be named back to Department of War.
Yes, they do.
National Guard should be for Homeland Defense unless at war. Yeah, maybe just have fewer wars. That'd be good. Let's see. G. Thomas 58 says, Patrice, can you please repeat the election integrity website, which you have two, I believe.
Oh, I'm happy to. Sure. It's mifairelections.org. MichiganFairElections.org. mifairelections.org. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adam. Could I make one thing about the Defend the Guard situation? Through this, I made a new friend in the American Legion over the post in Livingston County, Bobby Bright, and he told me that they have 1,200 members, and he said this thing went through. They all voted on it. It was essentially unanimous at the American Legion post in Livingston County, which I think is very interesting. And I also heard he told me the story about just before Hurricane Helene hit the Carolinas. We had to send some Michigan Guards people down there because they were sending Carolina Guards people overseas, which is idiotic. And of course, that's why we have to stop this so we can have these folks here at home to help against natural disasters and for other things and controlled by their own home states. They have to nullify the empire.
Excellent. On Rumble, Mark Cornkey says, we are reposting on Liberty Tree Radio. Thank you. War Department is an honest title and traditional. Yep. These are true. All right. So speaking of wars, it's been a bit of a week in Washington. I don't know if, and we should probably chat a little bit about what's been going on there. First off, I gotta say, I saw Marco Rubio was on Megyn Kelly's program talking about how the unipolar moment of the United States hegemony is over, and now we are becoming a multipolar world. And I thought, this is a revolutionary thing for any U.S. government official to say in any circumstances. The last person I would have ever guessed would be saying such a thing as Marco Rubio.
Who had Marco Rubio for America First on their bingo card? I didn't.
Well, no, I mean, not just America First, but to say that we actually have other countries in the world we should treat as, not just our subordinates. I mean, that's not, I mean, I applaud the honesty, but,
Sure.
That's not something I'd expect hearing from any Trump administration official. I'm not talking about kicking the shit out of China or in Russia. It's actually kind of refreshing. I don't have to worry quite so much about nuclear war or any of that kind of stuff. But still, as remarkable as that is, the complete lack of anyone in the media talking about this. You would think they'd be like, oh my gosh, Marco Rubio and the Trump administration, they're talking about surrendering our hegemony to other countries. What's going on here? No one's saying a word about it. It's
almost like Marco decided to finally start reading Seymour Hersh and learned a new line or two. It's really impressive.
Yeah. Now, there's been still no negotiations with Russia that I can see at all. They have not even approved of Russia's ambassador yet. And there's been no sign of any actual talks between Trump administration officials and the Russians. But the one thing that's happened throughout this past week is Ukraine has just been completely frozen. And I don't know if you guys saw this story, but as soon as they froze all of the U.S. aid, all of the media in Ukraine went dark. Like all of the media in Ukraine and a bunch of other countries apparently just been financed by the State Department. And now they're all out. They're just all out of action, I guess, because there's no more tax dollars coming their way.
Yeah, the story about USAID that broke yesterday about all the different things they've been funding that are way outside of the purview of the federal government, including spying on American citizens. USAID doing that. I think we're going to see a very painful year for America, especially for those that believe in the purity of the United States government. We're going to start seeing some things reminiscent of the 70s church commission stuff that's going to be ripping people's eyelids open.
Yeah.
Well,
We need it.
I would say, quickly, hopefully people will see that America and the United States government are two different things.
Yes.
Yep. Al Ganu says, ever consider a voter initiative if the current Michigan legislature, Congress actually only means federal, but the Michigan legislature, if they don't take it up, or possibly a constitutional amendment for Michigan? I'll let you speak to that, Dan.
Yeah. So voter initiatives are wonderful tools. They're incredibly expensive. And right now, at this moment, we are a 5-person organization. I have myself. I have a paid communications guy that lives in Florida. I have a paid field director that lives in Texas. And then I've got 2 other consultants that work at a very part-time basis. We do not waste a penny on things that don't provide furtherance of the mission. And so we know where our lever is the strongest. Statewide voter initiatives cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. Even in a small state like New Hampshire, an initiative would be a $15 million proposition. It's just not something that we have the capability to do. I don't pay fundraisers to work for us and take a cut off the top. Every dollar that comes in from small dollar donors is spent 99% of it on the cause. And so while it's a great tool, it's built into our state constitutions, it's just not the lever of power we've decided to use. It's cheaper and more effective for us to use confrontational politics and 15 volunteers working a phone bank than it is to stand on a street corner and gather petition signatures.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen, what's happening in the state legislature and now in Congress too. People really tend to want to think that politicians are untouchable and totally immune from any kind of constituent pressure, but they are desperate for majority in both the U.S. federal level and the state level. And it's come down to like 1 or 2 seats to the point where, I hate to say it because I don't think that Michigan's U.S. senators are going to be flexible on any of the nominees, but it's because Gary Peters is retiring, probably because of how unpopular Democrats have become in Michigan. And Slotkin just barely got elected just now, so she's far away from her next election. But ordinarily, and I guess maybe this is a segue into the topic I was going to talk about for our big legislative action this week, which is lighting up our lawmakers over these 85 bills that Gretchen Whitmer has signed literally a week and a half ago, some of them. So we talked a little bit about this last week. I've got some more details on this. There are 85 bills, and I'll put them up on the screen just to prove how absolutely bizarre and unprecedented this is. I was talking to someone this week who said they contacted their state representative, a Republican, who said she had never heard about these things. So this is the public act table for 2024 in scare quotes, because when you get down to about page 20 here, you start noticing some things. These bills were approved on January 13th, 2025. And then from 191 on, which in my email blast earlier today, I listed all 85 of these bills out. These bills were approved by the governor on January 16th and beyond. Now, the significance of this, and this goes all the way out to the last bill she signed off on January 22nd, like a week and a half ago. And not trivial bills either. Look at this. Mandating medical services to participate in grant emergency medical transport reimbursement programs. That's, to somebody, that's important. And the thing is, the governor has only 2 weeks, 14 calendar days after a bill is presented to her to sign it into law. And if the session's over, the bill expires. But here's the thing. That means these bills had to have been presented to her no sooner than January 8th. In fact, January 8th, which was incidentally the first day that the Republicans were I mean, that was the day that Matt Hall was sworn in as Speaker of the House, was January 8th. And some of these bills, for example, I'll pull this one up. The bill that allows the X designation on your birth certificate for sex, X meaning not male, not female, on your birth certificate. That bill was presented to the governor, allegedly, according to the Secretary of State's website here. And I'm sorry, not the Secretary of State, the legislature's website. Let me pull this up here if I just find the right number. Hold on one sec. I got to look up the bill number. Is it this one? Yeah, 5303. Okay, let's go to 5303. Almost had it right there. Here's the bill. Public Act 230 of 2024. Was it 2024 though? According to the legislature's website, maintained by the Legislative Services Bureau, which is the people that actually draft the bills, it was presented to the governor at 12:46 p.m. on January 8th. In other words, right minutes after Matt Hall was elected Speaker of the House. Which, if true, means that whoever the person this was that delivered this bill to the governor, the clerk's office, I'd have to assume, was acting on the authority of Speaker Matt Hall. Now, this is something that we should be demanding answers on, because something is true here. Either this was done without any authority, which is probably most likely, because I can't imagine Matt Hall would send this bill to the governor's desk. There was no Speaker of the House between December 31st and January 8th at 12 p.m. So how can this be presented to the governor? On whose authority? I can't present any bills to the governor because I don't have the authority to do so. It doesn't matter if the House and Senate voted for it. That doesn't give me the right to present to the governor. But more fundamentally, I would argue these bills all expired on December 31st. And notice what they do here. Look at these dates. Like they almost know they're being deceptive. All these dates say December 31st, 2024. Even though it says on December 31st, bill ordered enrolled December 23rd, December 31st, presented to the governor on January 8th, December 31st, approved by the governor on 1/17, December 31st, filed the Secretary on 1/17, December 31st, assigned PA 230 of 2024. This is extremely suspicious. And here's what's most amazing about all this stuff, about all of these things, all this stuff. The Democrats have currently announced they're going to file suit against the Republicans for not presenting the 9 bills that Matt Hall held back.
That's right.
Because they were never presented, even by the 8th. Which, to me, seems like a completely frivolous, meritless lawsuit. Because, the first objection should be, the court can't do this. The court can't even hear this case because there's a separation of powers issue. It's not going to order the legislature to present a bill to the governor. That seems to me, even the partisan Michigan Supreme Court would have a difficulty doing that. But where's the Republican lawsuit? And by the way, I believe some people who are affected by some of these bills might be looking into filing suit. But as far as I can tell, the Republicans are totally silent. You don't see any of them saying, we're gonna challenge this. This is unconstitutional. This is completely illegal. This shows how completely incompetent the Democrats are. The Democrats have the ability to control the messaging just by fighting. They'll say, oh, yeah, we're going to file suit against those nasty Republicans who haven't taken our bill to the governor because we screwed up. They have no shame in filing legal challenges against bills they have no right to not be embarrassed about. The Republicans have 85 bills, 85 crazy bills, some of them extremist bills, some of them. And they don't even challenge them when they don't even make it to the governor's desk until January 8th, 2025. It's unreal. And going back to, go ahead, Patrice.
Well, Adam, don't you think that the Republicans are probably checking their ammunition and seeing what they're going to do? Because especially these 9 bills, these 9 bills were never sent by the clerk. They were never reconciled. They were reconciled, but then they were never finished and proofread and transmitted to the governor. So when the new legislature came in, the 103rd, they're bound by law to be independent. The 102nd has no authority to influence the 103rd legislature. So I just have to think that the current leaders in the House are checking to see what they can do, because and I don't know about all 85. That's really fascinating that you're bringing this up, that they were way late.
Well, the reason I think we need to start demanding answers is because like I said, I talked to somebody who just said, I talked to my lawmaker about this past week, and he said she had no idea about any of this stuff. So now I know, because I've been talking about this for at least a couple of weeks now, that some people in Lansing know about it. And I understand sometimes they need time to plan and to come up with what their course of action will be. But the clock has been ticking. The Democrats have got their plan. They've already passed a resolution in the Senate saying we're going to take legal action. Why is this not a top line priority for the House Republicans? Like, we have 85 bad bills we could be attacking that the Democrats appear to have illegally put into the books. Like, that's pretty substantial to me. By the way, also every single one of these bills, maybe not every single one, but I think most of them, I'll double check, but I think the huge majority of these were completely partisan bills. I mean, this one I just brought up a moment ago, 20-18 in the Senate, 56-0 in the House, with no Republicans voting for it. And this is the record for a lot of these bills. And they have the audacity to demand the Republicans, none of whom voted for that bill, to let the governor just sign into law. I mean, that's shocking. So, yeah, I think, frankly, I'm out of patience. A couple of weeks have gone by on this. I think it's about time that these guys start acting. And going back to Dan's point earlier about not praising politicians, I remember at the end of the year, friends of the show remember me saying, I very rarely do this, but I got to salute Matt Hall for doing such a great job holding the line. And now, lo and behold, where's our answers on this, guys? Because this is pretty substantial. I know they're busy with, committee assignments and that kind of crap, but it seems like a pretty big deal. I don't know. Just saying. What else do we want to talk about this week? That was a big deal. Oh, I guess I should talk about the thing that was like the title of the stream. There's been this story in this goes to what we've been talking about anyway, which is the Trump administration versus versus Gretchen Whitmer. There was this article that just popped up yesterday in the Detroit Free Press. So not exactly the most not exactly going to be brilliant or anything, but this is their big headline. Is a Trump Whitmer budget battle brewing? And you got Gretchen Whitmer there looking insecure as always, and this is their take. The unstoppable vehicle meets the pothole of unknown depth. Obviously, we're talking about the Trump train versus Whitmer, the pothole of Michigan's biggest, fattest pothole. No, not, of course, we're talking about Paul Egan. No, the unstoppable vehicle is the always expanding state spending plan. And the unknown, unpredictable pothole is Trump. Well, Paul Egan apparently has not been following the news in the past week, because I think there's some change a coming in federal spending, and it's coming pretty quick. But the spin on this story is monumental. Look at this. Why has the state budget grown so much? Some of it just reflects inflation, which is up about 23% in 2019. Oh, that's all. Just 23% of your life savings wiped out in 5 years. And notice also that it just reflects the premise here. The premise here, of course, is that the value of your dollar has gone down 23%, but also you must now pay 23% more too, because the government must be held harmless for the policies of inflation that they cause. So you will pay double the inflation. You'll pay the inflation that you pay, and you'll also pay the government's inflation too. That's how that works. You lose the value of your dollars, but also the government becomes more expensive. You pay for their salaries too. All that stuff. So this goes on, and state employee salaries make the biggest chunk of the budgets. and blah, blah, blah. There's more employees to pay, and they're making more money. They're making more money. Well, let's see where things go in the next 2 years, guys. But I'll tell you,
there's going to be one place that Michigan's going to fill in their state budget right away. And when Gretchen Whitmer first became governor, I remember that the executive order that she wrote about making sure we have a diversity and equity and inclusion officer in every government agency. And Trump walks in on day one with his big old stick that he swings, and he cut that funding on day one. So there's going to be a budget cut coming right there, and there's going to be probably 150 state DEI officers who are going to be out of a job. So we might see a little bump in unemployment for a minute too.
Yep, there is that. The article does mention that actually. Yep, there's going to be those DEI officers. But of course, the big question is, what will happen when the budget fight begins? Because in the past, in the past years, Democrats had control of everything. In the 2 sessions before that, the Republicans had the House and the Senate. This is the first time it's going to be split legislature plus Governor Whitmer. What is the House? What are the House Republicans going to do?
I'll say in states where you have these divided governments, it is incumbent on the minority party to dig in, find your issue, hold the ground, give up nothing, fight everything. A good government is a government that does nothing, right? So if they just stalemate everything for an entire session, that's a win. We'll take that. That's the people that helps us, the people, more than anything else.
Yep. Heather Dad says Michigan is paying state employees more while we make less. Michigan has the lowest average personal income in history. Yeah, that is going to be the narrative, folks. That, and I'll tell you what, with Trump taxing all of these imports and everything, and slashing government jobs like crazy, there is probably going to be some Trump tax cuts coming. Some major tax cuts coming, and that's going to be really, really solid messaging from us. Is all the Republicans are doing is cutting taxes, and all the Democrats are doing is trying to raise them. On Rumble, Mark says at least Gretchen lost the high gloss clear paint finish. Yeah, did you see her in clown makeup the other day? I remember. I think I saw that on. I forgot what the reason was, but she was doing some kind of appearance, and she was wearing this neon red lipstick. Looked hideous. And maybe that was that picture we were just looking at. Was it? Well, no, but I guess she always wears this really bright lipstick. Anyway, J.E. Thomas says, what about the $14.2 billion Granholm gave her on January 20th for the Green New Deal? Well, $22.4 billion, and it's useless. Also says Joe Tate did not deliver the bills. That is the big question. You should have given them to her on December 31st. Yep. That's and here's the thing I would say too. You could argue, I'm sure some people will argue, well, the state Supreme Court is controlled by Democrats who are partisan hacks. So if we fight them in court, we're going to lose anyway. That's actually even still a better outcome than not fighting at all. Because not fighting at all, you're just conceding. Oh, yeah, of course they can do that. That would be allowing that precedent. Yep. That from now on you can just deliver a bill 2-3 weeks later. And sure, there's no problem at all there. If the Supreme Court gets it wrong, first of all, attack the Supreme Court. Always a good thing to do. File a federal appeal. You know, there's options. But when you don't fight, you look like you are guilty, and that's what Republicans look like right now. Democrats are suing the Republicans. Republicans are doing nothing, trying to move on, trying to turn the other cheek. Just makes you look guilty. Algan News says, next Michigan budget they will look for more ways to make revenue, toll roads, increase sales. Whitmer's talked about all these things. Some of the bills they passed in January were tax and fee increases too, by the way. John King says, not for Michigan unless Republicans have a good or great 2026. We have no reason not to. I mean, Republicans should be doing nothing but passing excellent bills that the governor will refuse to pass and just message on those for the next 2 years. That's easy street. Easy street.
Adam, there you just spoke to my heart. That is the heart of confrontational politics. You make there be an action in the legislature and the executive branch so you can identify an enemy and pinpoint what they did wrong. They voted against it. They vetoed it. They didn't pass it through committee, whatever it is. And that becomes your dividing issue because it's easy to rally the troops when you have a common enemy. Put something on the governor's desk, transmit something to the Senate, point out Senate leadership being the problem. Whatever it is, use a good piece of legislation that speaks to conservative values and force the issue. And then you can raise an army to defeat them.
So I would just like to add to Dan's voice on this, that I don't think Michigan citizens have been paying enough attention to our Supreme Court. And they're not paying attention to these candidates that are being nominated and then elected. And now we have a very, very liberal Supreme Court. And the public needs to know what their rulings are. So they need to be challenged. These things need to go up to them, and people need to see how they rule. Because we have to pay attention to every branch of our government, and the Supreme Court has been getting a pass for a long time.
Yeah, I think we've been, I mean, to be fair, we've been very focused on Trump and the majority and all that, but we dropped the ball in the state Supreme Court, and the numbers in the past election were terrible, frankly. And just because Democrats have been messaging on abortion and Republicans have just not been messaging and not saying these are partisan extremists who are gutting the Constitution, gutting our civil liberties. And if they actually challenge these 85 bills, just completely violating, the Michigan Constitution's most basic prescription for how a bill becomes a law. Yeah, John King says Senate Democrats are blaming Matt Hall rather than Joe Tate. Well, of course they are. What do you expect them to do? The issue is Republicans aren't blaming Joe Tate. Hey, Representative, what's up with these 85 bills the Democrats apparently just signed into law? Huh? What? Who? I don't know what you're talking about. That's a Republican state rep, folks. That's how much they're on this. That's how on the ball they are. Allegheny says the fact we still allow nonpartisan court elections when they're anything but partisan. Yeah, I mean, you should never say the word Michigan Supreme Court without saying partisan extremist Michigan Supreme Court. Every single time. Every single time. Yeah, Mark says the whole of the battlefield must be engaged. Each fight, each office is important. Well, we have a scarcity of resources. That is just a thing, but and this year's going to be big, folks. We got the House, State Senate, Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, another 2 state Supreme Court seats, and an open U.S. Senate race, and 3 highly competitive U.S. House seats. So it is going to be a highly, highly influential election in a year and a half from now. So we've got our work cut out for us. There's no question about it. And we're going to be upping our game for the next few months. I guarantee you that. And we'll be talking more about that in the days and weeks to come. But in the meantime, I got an event or two I want to plug, but and I'll put this flyer back up again also for the Defend the Guard event. But Patrice and also Dan and Dennis, if you got any other events, things you want to plug, please do so now, because I think I'm about ready to call it a stream unless there's more you guys want to talk about.
Well, I was just going to say real quickly, because Sean Dow was just in the state the other day for the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, gave a really good class on that. And obviously, I was remiss in not promoting that event. Someone asked me to promote the event, and I failed to, and I apologize because I meant to. I'm sorry, Dennis. Go ahead. No worries. Yeah, it was top notch, and Emily Bauman deserves a lot of credit for that. That she did that. But also, I was going to say maybe we could direct people also to Dan and to the Defend the Guard organization for reading about and volunteering to help with some of the confrontational politics to help nullify this federal overreach in this area.
That's a great point. Sean Dow is a great teacher of the confrontational politics model from Campaign for Liberty. He also teaches with me when we put on our political leadership schools to raise an activist army for Defend the Guard. If you want to know more about Defend the Guard, our organization is actually called Bring Our Troops Home, and our legislative effort is Defend the Guard. So we have 2 distinct websites, bringourtroopshome.us and defendtheguard.us. And on defendtheguard.us, you can actually click on Michigan and see the bill that's being sponsored in Michigan, who the sponsors are, current action that's happening in Michigan, and you can sign up to receive regular correspondence about the efforts in Michigan or nationwide. And then always, of course, on all the social media, we're at Troops Home US. But Dennis, I really appreciate that warm handoff, and Adam, I appreciate you having us on. It's been an incredible broadcast, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally got to connect, because I feel like we've been like ships passing in the night for like the last decade or two at this point. So yeah, defendtheguard.us, and you said troopshomenow.us is the other
at Troops Home US is social media, but the other website is bringourtroopshome.us.
There you go.
Yep, and then if you it'll say enlist in the movement if you want to get the emails, and then we have a support group. It's called the Remnant. If you guys know the story of the Remnant from Job and the Bible, you know that the Remnant will be gathered. You know, we don't know that each other are out there, but when somebody breathes life and speaks truth, the Remnant gathers together and becomes a unifying force. And we're mostly from the Ron Paul Revolution era movement, and I think that's kind of what America's facing right now is. That movement from 2008, the Ron Paul Revolution, has finally grown up and gotten into positions of leadership and the ability to have the financial resources and the connections and the networks to be able to make this happen. And, you know, my favorite T-shirt I wear as often as I can is Ron Paul was right. And it's just what some of the principles I live by. He's one of my heroes, and we're all disciples of that movement.
So we don't have any big events planned, but we are moving to a chapter model. So we're encouraging people to get involved in their local communities and to become more involved on a chapter level. And we will be focusing a lot on helping the non-citizen, only citizens vote action, which there'll be a petition to be put on the ballot as a constitutional amendment, and we'll be supporting that. So that's really important. There was one Chinese student, as you know, that basically turned himself in. He went in to take his vote back. And he said, well, you can't. And so they're using him a lot. But the truth of the matter is we don't have any idea how many non-citizens are voting in our elections because we don't track them. We just have a little checkbox when they register for a driver's license that they attest to being a citizen. And it's a wide open door that should not be open. Our Constitution is very clear that citizens should be voting. So we're going to have to really enforce that, because otherwise we're still very vulnerable. Our elections are very vulnerable.
Yeah, and by design, because the Democrats have removed all the safeguards. Mm-hmm. Tony Jacobson says, at the debate, and Scott Greeley mentioned it helped if Republicans picked our state chair candidates earlier. Or maybe SC stands for something else, but that does bring up the fact that on Wednesday, the Plymouth Republican Club is it the Northville Republican Club? One of them is having a state chair candidates forum. And Patty, if you are in the chat, please shoot me a link, because we're going to be there on Wednesday. I'm happy to promote it because I believe I'm one of the moderators for that event. Oh, he said, Supreme Court he meant. Okay, Supreme Court. But there is a name of a restaurant, and maybe Dennis will remember because it's escaping me, but it's this Wednesday. I'll put a link in the description when I find out the time and place, because I'm trying to look it up on the fly right now. I'm striking out here. But Wednesday night, there's going to be a state chair candidates forum in Plymouth, and there's also going to be one in Ann Arbor coming up on February 17th. But I'll do a better announcement about that when we get closer to the date, I think. Because I want to do a stream just about the new Washtenaw Republican Club too. But that will be a stream for us for tonight, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. It's going to be a crazy year and a half. And frankly, it is very exciting to see all the great things Trump is doing, taking an absolute knife to the Washington, D.C. establishment, to the point where it's happening so fast, my head is almost spinning. It's wonderful. So let's see where this goes.
That's the Michigan GOP state chair candidate forum. I think you were looking for.
Sailor Sam 2500 says, I thought the state chair forum was going to be the Imagine in Canton. Actually, that does sound right. The Imagine Theater in Canton. Yep. And let's see here. What else? Sailor Sam's looking at defendtheguard.com. It's not defendtheguard.com. It's defendtheguard.us. That would be why the web page didn't come up for you. All right, folks. Oh, I I just found the link. Actually, Dan sent me the link. Thank you, Dan. This is the link to the candidate forum this Wednesday. Imagine 2026. So you can see in the address bar there is the link to the Eventbrite. So you can pause the video and get the link to RSVP and get your tickets. And it's going to be this Wednesday at 7 p.m. It is, I don't believe, being streamed. Someone in the chat asked that question. But our forum in Washtenaw County on the 17th will be. So more on that TBA. All right, folks. Thank you guys all for tuning in for our Sunday night live stream. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful guests. And everyone in the chat's been raving about what a great stream it's been. So thank you guys all for coming on. And look forward to another exciting week in Michigan politics. And until next time, when hopefully Facebook is working again. But thank you guys all for being with us on the other channels as well. Thanks for all you guys do for liberty. Until next time, peace.